Today we're going to be dissecting colors here. Can you spot the difference? Two light oranges made out of the same cadmium orange, but I used two different techniques. Can you see what's wrong? See, when I first started, I thought that you only need white and black to lighten and darken colors, but in reality there are way more options that can make your colors pop out. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be dissecting some colors. So here is how we dissect a color, but you might say, well, where are all the other colors, right? There's only one color here. Well, there are plenty of colors, plenty of shades of the same hue, in fact, but indeed there are several hues. So we have to really make sure that we don't make the confusion between hue, value, and chroma. So let's see that. Any color has 3 dimensions, and all those contribute to how the color looks. That's just a quick refreshing, but the first one is value. That's what we want to focus on here for our demonstration, because what we want to do is make the value go from light to dark or from dark to light. We want to change the value. If it's just monochromatic like that, black and white work perfectly, but the only problem is that there are other dimensions that also play a role. The next dimension is chroma, and chroma is this. It's the intensity of a color. Sometimes we call it saturation. It's not the same, but well, if you want to simplify, just figure that it's the same. Chroma is for paint, saturation is for digital images, computer screens. What you have on Photoshop is saturation, what you have in your paint is actually chroma. Well, it doesn't really matter that much, but well, let's call it that. And the only thing is chroma is very susceptible to changing with value, and we'll see that it's the most tricky dimension to keep in control. And obviously we have hue. Hue is the most basic representation of color. In fact, when you ask somebody what's their favorite color, what kind of color would you want for your living room, what they really think about is hue. For most people who are not artists, hue really is the sole definition of a color, but for an artist, if you want to really dive into color mixing, color theory, if you want to understand how to mix your paint, you have to take all the 3 dimensions at the same time. The only problem though is you can't just change one without affecting the others. You can't change one without affecting the others, and that's why color mixing is so tricky. So color has 3 dimensions, which means that there is no simple way to represent them all together in the same space, because color is tricky like that. It doesn't have a perfect shape. It can't be contained in a sphere. It has been tried, doesn't work. And color is just messy. This is what our color vision looks like. See, it's not a perfect sphere, because there are some hues that we see more clearly, some hues that we see less well, and each hue has a specific color profile. As you can see, this tree has little slices here. Each slice is one color hue with its value and chroma. So basically, this is the best we got. We take each of the hues and we give each hue its own slice and create a diagram for each hue. So how many hues you decide to divide your color space into will give you a diagram for each. So let's do that. That's what I call dissecting color. So we're going to take one slice and we're going to call it a diagram, a color diagram, or a color profile, whatever you want to call it. I'm calling it a diagram, but well, whatever, you get the point. We're going to take one of these slices here and see how it works. So here we are. We have a nice little slice, a nice little diagram. We've taken this one in particular, this slice here, and we put this into a diagram, and it gives us that. All right, before anybody asks, all the PDFs, all the diagrams that I'm demonstrating here are part of my PDF that you can buy on my website. It's a very small purchase, but you know, I do have to sell stuff to provide for my family, so I hope you understand that. If you want to support that and learn tons of stuff, you can buy the PDF with all the color wheels. You can even buy the color course, a complete course on color theory under all its dimensions, like full-on dive into color theory, or you can check out my oil painting course. That's a great way to learn and support the channel at the same time. So let's imagine that we have this nice orange here, and we want to make it lighter or darker. We want to create a nice gradation of value to be capable of representing a volumetric object that looks realistic with shadows and lights. How do we do that? As you can see, the color diagram works like that. On this side, you have the chroma. And on this side, this axis, you have the value. But as you can see, the higher you want to go in terms of chroma, so the more intense you want your color to be, the less variety you can have in value. So at some point, if you want to keep your color high chroma, like this, above 60, for example, if you want to keep your color above 60, you're going to have very limited option in terms of how dark you can make them. That's one super important thing that you have to understand about color profiles like that, is that not all colors can be darkened with the exact same degree of intensity. Same thing for lightening colors. You can lighten them up until a certain point, but past a certain point, the chroma, so the amount of different nuances of chroma that you can make out of one, is going to be significantly reduced as you move towards the lightest area. Actually, let me remove my face here. Okay, so there you can see. To get to the white here, there is a lot of variety that you are losing compared to this one, which is the ideal value. So 60 is kind of the home value, or its peak chroma value slice. And not all the colors have the same. Let me show you. So let's take the color just after this one in the color wheel. This one is coming up right there. Let's see what it does. This, as you can see, doesn't have exactly the same color profile. They are not the same. And this one still shines at 60, but it doesn't look exactly the same. The distribution of lights, values, darks is not exactly the same, although they are very similar. And this is the one just right after here. If you move even more, so you go like that, here, here, and see we've switched position here. The peak is now at 70, because this is much more yellow, and yellow really shines when it's bright. Actually, yellow has very little options when it comes to dark. What is a dark yellow? Have you ever thought about that? What is really a dark yellow? Crazy question, but think about it. There is no such thing as a dark yellow. Now, when we move on even one step further, you can see that the peak is even lighter now. This color here really shines because it feels great at 80 in value, 80%, but really it's very hard to make it look great with a dark. There is no way to make a high chroma dark yellow of this kind. This yellow can't be both dark and chromatic. It can be light and chromatic. It can have a very high chroma and be very light, but it can't be very highly chromatic and very dark at the same time. Not all colors are like that. Yellow is very specific like that. Yellow is always good when it's light. A yellow is naturally a light color, and we perceive it this way, and a dark yellow is something that our eyes can't really catch, which is why there is nothing in this range here. But it's not like that for all the colors. Let's see this one here. This blue. Can you see how this blue really works very well and has a high level of chromatic variety if you make it dark? If you remember, at 30% value, the yellow was only limited to 3 gradations. 1, 2, 3. This is neutral. Whereas the blue here, 240 blue, has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 gradations of like nuances. All these can be done with dark. However, when you move closer to the light tones, there is less variety compared to the yellow. Yellow had much more in this range. And blue has much less, because blue is a naturally dark color. Blue works really well in the dark range, and yellow works really well in the light range. Now, if you understand that, you might understand how it might actually be possible to darken with a blue instead of black. And why not lighten with yellow instead of white? And that's where you start getting it. You can actually use black and white. So here's black, and let me remove my face again. Here's white. So basically, if you take this orange and if you pull it directly with black, it's going to make it shift directly towards this, and you're missing on all these options here that will be out of your mixing area here, because if the black is pulling it directly towards this dull side here. And if you directly mix it with white, it's going to pull it towards the white almost immediately, and you're missing out on all this variety here that you can't really reach with white, because you could reach potentially this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. But wait, it gets a little bit more complicated. You see, black is not a perfect color, and ivory black, for example, is a little bit bluish. So every time you mix with ivory black, not only are you taking it out of the best chromatic range that you would want, but also you're kind of changing the hue at the same time, because the black pulls it out more towards, the green side, because a yellowish color mixed with a bluish color is going to pull it towards, the dull green area. So you're not going to end up with something that looks like that, but more with something that will look like that. So ideally, if you want your maximum chroma, you want this type of curve here. The only problem is, how can you get that if you mix with black and white directly? What you want is pigments that are lighter to lighten and darker to darken. The thing is, you might not necessarily have this light orange that you need. So in this case, we might think about using some type of cadmium yellow. The only problem is the cadmium yellow is going to pull it towards yellow. Every time you use a different pigment, it will pull it to itself and want to turn the other color to make it look more like itself. Every time you mix a color with another color, it pulls in the middle to get to this other color. So here is a simplified bird's eye view of our color space. If you have an orange like that and you pull it towards yellow, it will pull it towards itself and give you something in the middle here. So what you want is find a complementary color, so a color that's on the other side of the space to kind of balance that. And all in all, these two should be lighter in value than this one. And of course, after that, you also need at some point to add white, because if you want to make it light, at some point white is inevitable. It's just that you can add a little bit of this yellow to your white to give it a little bit of punch, and a little bit of this red to your white. So what you're going to do is you're going to use your white, you're going to use a little touch of cadmium yellow to bring it back towards the chromatic side, and a little bit of cadmium red, pyrrole red, or whatever kind of red, maybe magenta, quinacridone rose, whatever works, to bring it more towards the right hue. So the yellow would improve the chroma, and the red would here improve the hue. So here, let's take this orange, for example, cadmium orange here. Let me show you if I mix it with white. You've got something very dull almost immediately. Even though it's still a pretty potent orange, you immediately got something very dull. So now I'm going to show you how you can, for example, use a yellow instead of white, and how you can compensate with a different hue. So here, you mix the orange with the yellow, gives a very bright orange, but feels kind of yellowish, right? So no problem, I'm just going to use a little touch of this red here, a little touch of red to bring it back, readjust the hue, and now I'm going to use a little touch of white because we still need to lighten it. We can still use white, it's not forbidden, of course. It's just that we need to use white in combination with nice pigments that will bring this cadmium orange towards the lighter side. So a little bit of white, a little bit of this yellow, this cadmium yellow, and a little bit of red to readjust the hue. The yellow will make it lighter and yet keep the chroma very high, and the red is just here, just a little touch, small, very small amount, just to keep this mix in a nice hue. The lightness is provided by the yellow. The yellow also keeps the chroma very high, and the red just keeps the hue under control. Now let's see how we darken. So here it is, just to show you the difference. This is the orange that we've lightened with pure white, and this is the orange that we've lightened with yellow, white, and a touch of red to readjust the hue. It makes a world of difference. This feels much more like an organic light orange, whereas this is a very dull orange. So, and it doesn't matter what white you're using. I know that flake white would give us something that would be less opaque and less pale than this. But of course, if you count only on flake white to keep your colors fresh and vibrant, it means that you're never going to learn how to properly mix and understand colors. The 3 dimensions of colors, hue, value, chroma, all the dimensions matter in the end. Now, to darken, we're gonna make things very simple. The thing is, we have great pigments that are dark on almost all the sides of the color wheel. So no matter where you start from, there is a dark pigment that will work pretty well for each of the hues. If you're more on the orange-red side, then definitely go for something like raw umber, burnt umber. It's a dark, very dark brown that will work perfectly. And here, if we mix it with black, you immediately have something that looks very greenish, like almost olive green. Doesn't look really well and doesn't look like great dark orange. It looks more like olive green almost. It's not the color that you want. Very simple in this case. We can darken with a burnt umber. Look at how similar it is. It will feel a lot more like a dark orange rather than a green. And in this case, it works. If it's not the right hue, you can always add a touch of red, for example. Bring it more towards the red side. Who knows? Like whatever you need. Burnt umber would look perfectly well here. So just pulling it towards the dark side with something that's similar looking, that has a similar hue, is ideal. If you somehow you have this color in your inventory, you can also use it. Like if you have this, a color that looks like that, maybe Naples yellow, something like that. If you have this color here, just use it. It will work perfectly. It will pull it exactly towards this side, so towards the right type of curve that you want to preserve the freshness, the vibrancy of your color. Now, let's say we have this blue here. You want to darken it. In this case, you can do pretty well with ivory black. You pull it directly towards black, but you can find some absolutely gorgeous pigments that are in this range, like Prussian blue would work well. Ultramarine blue deep would be somewhere here as well. So it would be perfect pigments for that. So if you take this phthalo manganese blue, for example, in this case, it's not the same as with the orange. In this case, darkening with black only works actually pretty well. And of course, if you want to maintain it very blue like that, you might want to use ultramarine blue, because ultramarine is darker. As you can see, my ultramarine is here. It's much darker than the phthalo manganese blue, so if I darken it with that, it's going to fit very well in the same color range, give me a darker version of this blue. Works perfectly. To make a blue lighter, it could be nice to think about a cyan. What you can do is use this cobalt teal, for example. It will give you something much lighter, because this cobalt teal is much lighter. It's more on the green side, so you might want to readjust. And here, as you can see, it's dominating here a lot more. So what I can do is pull it more towards the purple side by just adding a touch of something purple magenta. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a very small amount of quinacridone just to bring it back towards the blue side, control the hue. Just as we did with the red for the orange mix, we're going to pull this one more towards the blue side here by bringing up this one. And in the end, of course, we can add white, because why not? White is not, it's not like you can't use it ever. It's just that you can use it by complementing it with other pigments. And this is what creates all these wonderful nuances. Look at how much variety we have here. So if you learn how to really dissect colors like that, if you learn how to properly understand how to make a color lighter without white and how to make a color darker without black, you'll have a completely different mindset about color mixing. You'll see that your colors will stay way more vibrant and they'll look fresh all the time. And you'll see that it will be much easier to expand the potentials of your colors, make anything you have in your head a reality without having to have it look really dull and lifeless. That's it for this video, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, hit the bell notification to be notified every time I upload a new video.